The streets of downtown Los Angeles were a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling sidewalks, where professionals in tailored suits brushed past artists hawking their paintings and musicians playing soulful tunes for spare change. Among the chaos sat Joe, a man who had once been a part of the hustle but now watched it all unfold from the sidelines. His back pressed against the rough brick wall of a coffee shop. His hands clutched a weathered cardboard sign that read, "Lost everything. Need help to get back on my feet?" Joe's appearance told a story before he ever opened his mouth. His unkempt beard was streaked with gray, his sunken eyes bore the weight of sleepless nights, and his threadbare coat barely shielded him from the brisk autumn air. People passed him by without a second glance. Occasionally, someone would toss a coin into the cup beside him, but most ignored him, their gazes fixed on their phones or the pavement ahead. A young couple paused briefly, whispered to each other, and then hurried along without even looking back. Joe caught their murmured words. "He'll just spend it on booze." It hadn't always been like this. Just a few years ago, Joe was a proud mechanic who ran his own small auto repair shop. Nestled in a corner of the city, his garage was a community hub where neighbors stopped by, not just for car repairs, but also for a chat or a cup of coffee. Joe had a knack for fixing things, a skill he'd inherited from his father, who had taught him how to tinker with engines as a boy. His hands, once steady and strong, now trembled slightly from the cold and hunger. Joe had a modest home, a wife named Claire, and a daughter, Emily, who adored him. He used to spend his weekends teaching Emily how to ride her bike or helping her with school projects. But life had a way of unraveling even the most carefully woven plans. When the economy took a downturn, Joe's shop suffered. Fewer customers came in, and the ones who did often couldn't afford to pay him in full. Bills piled up, creditors called incessantly, and the stress took a toll on his marriage. Arguments with Claire became frequent, and the once happy household turned into a battleground of blame and frustration. Claire left, taking Emily with her. Joe's once stable world crumbled, and he found himself on the streets with nothing but memories of a better time. Now, every day felt like a battle for survival. Joe had learned which parts of the city were safer to sleep in, which shelters had the least trouble, and where he might find a meal if he got there early enough. He had also learned to avoid certain people, other homeless individuals, who had turned to drugs or violence to cope with their circumstances. Joe had no such crutch. All he had was the faint hope that things might one day get better. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the cafe behind him, teasing his empty stomach. Joe's thoughts were interrupted by the low hum of an electric car pulling up to the curb. He didn't look up at first. Luxury cars were a dime a dozen in this part of the city, but the sound of a door opening and closing caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a man approach. The man was casually dressed in jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers. He carried himself with an ease that suggested he belonged anywhere he went. Joe instinctively shrank back, unsure of the man's intentions. He had encountered all types on the streets, some kind, others condescending, and a few outright hostile. The man stopped a few feet away, tilting his head as he read the sign. Then, to Joe's surprise, the man crouched down to his level, ignoring the curious glances from passersby. "Hey," the man said, his voice calm and steady. "What's your story?" Joe hesitated. Most people who asked that question didn't really care about the answer. They just wanted to feel better about themselves or satisfy their curiosity. But there was something different about this man. His tone wasn't patronizing, it was genuine. "I made some bad choices," Joe said finally, his voice rough from days of little use. "Lost my business, my home, my family. Now I'm just trying to survive." The man nodded thoughtfully as if weighing Joe's words. "If you had a second chance," he asked, "what would you do with it?" Joe let out a bitter laugh. "Second chances don't come for free. I'd need a miracle." To Joe's astonishment, the man smiled. He pulled out his phone and began typing. Joe watched, confused, as the man made a call. "Hi, it's me," the man said. "I need you to set up a meeting with the housing department and find a good job training program nearby. Something hands-on, mechanical." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Thanks. I'll follow up soon." When the call ended, the man turned back to Joe. "Let's get you started," he said. Joe blinked, unsure if this was some cruel joke. "Why are you helping me?" The man extended his hand. "Because everyone deserves a second chance. My name's Elon, by the way. Elon Musk." Joe stared at the man in disbelief. He had heard the name, of course. Elon Musk was one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, the genius behind Tesla and SpaceX. But what was someone like him doing here, talking to a homeless man on the street? Elon didn't wait for a response. He motioned for Joe to follow him. Hesitant but curious, Joe grabbed his backpack and got to his feet. He walked a few blocks to a sleek Tesla parked near the curb. Elon opened the passenger door and gestured for Joe to get in. "Are you serious?" Joe asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Elon grinned. "Dead serious. Let's go." The ride was quiet at first, Joe too stunned to speak. As they weaved through the city, Elon began to explain his plan. "I've been thinking about starting an initiative to help people get back on their feet," Elon said. "People like you who just need a chance. You could be the first." Joe shook his head. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elon replied. "Just don't waste it." They arrived at a modest apartment complex where Elon's team had already arranged for temporary housing. A social worker named Karen greeted them and gave Joe a tour of his new space. It wasn't much, but to Joe, it felt like a palace compared to the cold, hard pavement he had called home. Karen handed Joe a packet of papers detailing the next steps. "We'll start with getting you some new clothes, a haircut, and a medical checkup. After that, we'll enroll you in a job training program. How does that sound?" Joe nodded, still trying to process everything. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just show up and try your best," Karen said with a warm smile. Over the next few days, Joe's life began to change. He got a fresh haircut, new clothes, and a warm bed to sleep in. At first, he felt out of place, as though he didn't deserve any of it. But slowly, he began to adjust. Job training program focused on electric vehicle repair, a field that intrigued Joe. He had always been good with his hands, and the idea of learning something new excited him. As Joe settled into his new routine, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too good to be true. But every time doubt crept in, he reminded himself of Elon's words, "Everyone deserves a second chance." The first day of job training was a mix of excitement and anxiety for Joe. As he entered the sleek, state-of-the-art Tesla training facility, he couldn't help but feel out of place. Everyone around him seemed younger, more confident, and far more familiar with the world of electric vehicles. Joe's nerves showed as he fumbled with his tool belt, and he wondered if he was too old or too broken to succeed. His first task was a basic diagnostic on a Tesla battery module. The instructor, a patient and encouraging man named Eric, guided Joe through the process. Joe's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the tools, but as he worked, muscle memory from years of repairing cars began to kick in. Fixing things had always been second nature to him, and soon, he found himself immersed in the task. By the end of the session, Joe had successfully completed the diagnostic. "You've got a natural talent for this," Eric said, clapping Joe on the back. "Keep it up." Joe's confidence grew with each passing day. He threw himself into the training, eager to learn everything he could about electric vehicles. He stayed late to practice, asked questions, and even started helping other trainees who were struggling. Slowly but surely, Joe began to feel like he belonged. Elon visited the training center one afternoon to check on Joe's progress. He watched from a distance as Joe explained a complex repair to a fellow trainee. When Joe noticed Elon, he walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "How's it going?" Elon asked. Joe smiled. "It's going well. Better than I expected, honestly. It feels good to be useful again." Elon nodded. "I knew you had it in you." By the time Joe completed the training program, he had become one of the top performers in his class. His instructors praised his work ethic, attention to detail, and ability to inspire others. Joe's transformation was undeniable, but the most meaningful moment came when he received an unexpected call from his daughter, Emily. Joe's phone buzzed late one evening as he sat in his modest apartment, reviewing notes from the day's training. He glanced at the screen and froze. The caller ID read, "Emily." With a shaky hand, Joe answered. "Hello, Dad?" Emily's voice was hesitant, but familiar. I heard about what you're doing. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you." Joe's throat tightened and tears welled in his eyes. "Thanks, sweetheart. That means the world to me. I'm trying to be better. For you." "I know, Dad," she said softly. "Maybe we could meet up sometime?" Joe's heart soared. "I'd like that. I'd like that a lot." The call marked the beginning of a new chapter in Joe's personal life. He and Emily began rebuilding their relationship, starting with small steps, but steadily growing closer. Joe's newfound confidence and stability allowed him to be the father Emily had always needed. Meanwhile, Elon had bigger plans for Joe. Recognizing his potential, Elon invited him to Tesla's headquarters for a meeting. Joe expected it to be a routine evaluation, but what he walked into was something entirely different. In a sleek conference room, Elon and a team of executives outlined their vision for a new initiative, Second Chances. The program would provide housing, job training, and mentorship for people struggling to rebuild their lives. "We want you to lead it," Elon said. Joe's jaw dropped. "Me? Who better?" Elon replied. "You've lived it. You know what it takes." Joe accepted the challenge, determined to make a difference. Over the next year, Second Chances became a beacon of hope for hundreds of people. Joe traveled across the country, sharing his story and helping others find their footing. Each success story reminded him of how far he had come. One evening, as Joe stood on stage at a Tesla event, he looked out at the audience and saw Elon in the front row, nodding with pride. Joe's voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. Someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That's all it takes sometimes. An act of kindness, one chance to start again. If I can do it, so can anyone." The applause was deafening, but Joe's eyes remained on Elon. In that moment, he realized that his journey wasn't just about redemption. It was about paying it forward, ensuring that no one else had to face the darkness alone.